welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. This is episode 30. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Andrea.
In today's show, we're going to Oslo, Norway to interview Sidsel Høivik, designer of exquisite and very feminine stranded knitted garments. We are then travelling from the Nordics to Georgia in the US to meet Rachel, our guest on Knitters of the World.
Yes. And there's a quick tutorial from me on the beauty of twisted stitch cables. I'm going to show you how to do 2 simple stitches, and then a whole world of beautiful designs is opened up to you. Andrew is starting a Fair project. Yay! I've finished sewing yet another dress, and I'm tackling sewing pleats on a skirt, which I want to show you. I've got a quick update to give you on how my arms are going, and we've got to show you some of the prizes we've got together for the culls. So it's a fairly full program today.
There's a big show coming up, so let's get started, and we're starting with me.
Yes.
So I am the apprentice on this show, and we have decided that it's time for me to take on my very first Fair Isle project. I think this may be partly because Andrea is suffering from Fair Isle withdrawal.
Yes.
The project that we chose to be my very first Fair Isle garment or work is the Booster Beanie by Gudrun Johnson. This pattern is actually the official 2017 Shetland Wool Week pattern. You can get a copy of the pattern for free if you sign up for their newsletter to find out about the Wool Week. So we'll include a link to the Wool Week, the Shetland Wool Week website in our program notes, and you can have a look at it yourself.
Yeah, and the reason why I picked this pattern for Andrew is I think it's a really fantastic pattern to start off Fair Isle knitting with, and he's going to learn two-handed Fair Isle knitting. He's still in shell shock about this news. So what's really great about it is true Fair Isle, you only ever have 2 colours in one row, and for this pattern it's a 4-stitch chart. So that means that you don't have long floats and you won't have to worry about weaving in floats as you go around. And a 4-stitch chart is very easy to memorise. So just say you've got 2 colours of red and blue, you're just going to be doing something like blue, red, 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 blue, red, 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 blue, red, red, red in a lovely circle. And then the next circle might just be blue, blue, red, blue, 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 red, blue. So you're going to get yourself in a lovely rhythm that's easy to memorise.
Yeah, because it's a geometrical pattern.
Yeah, and you don't want to be, when you're thinking about learning how to do two-handed Fair Isle, you don't want to be thinking about a stitch chart as well on top of that.
Sounds very wise to me.
Yeah, so that's going to be very easy, and that's why I picked it for Andrew. The second thing is that you can't go wrong for this particular pattern on what colours you pick out. So you could almost just go to your stash with your eyes closed, pick out 3 different balls of wool, and it's probably going to go together reasonably well, if not, the very least, very interesting it'll look. And that's just because of the way the geometrical shapes are. It's hard to go wrong. But if you do, when you are picking colours, there are 3 colours in this pattern, and colour A you use a little bit more of because you're doing it on the rhythm, on the ribbing at the bottom as well as the zigzags. So if you choose a dark colour for colour A, then just choose 2 light colours of the same tonal value for colours B and C, and you can't go wrong, and vice versa. If on colour A you want to choose a light colour, choose 2 dark colours for the other 2 colours, and then there's no problem. So the pattern suggests that you use the Jamieson and Smith 2-ply, and they're fantastic wools and such a great range of colours. So if you can, I really suggest to have a go with their wools. And if you're in the States, the Woolly Thistle stocks all of their wools, so it's a great opportunity to try out that wool on this pattern.
Yep.
But we are using, what are we using?
The wool that I'm using, this is actually, I'm really happy about this. This is leftovers from my Firebirds jumper. Yes. Andrea, do you want to show that?
Yes.
So this is the Firebirds jumper. The design is based on the design by Jade Starmore. All right. The original was for a small cardigan, but this has been scaled up and modified by Andrea to fit me. I love it as a jumper, and this is leftover wool from that project, so that's really good. The colours obviously match that jumper. I also have this scarf here. In episode 2, we visited Trefru Woolen Mill in Wales, and we got a tour of the mill from Brian, which was really great. While we were there, Madeline bought this scarf for me. It's a beautiful tweed scarf, and you can see the purple and the dark. I don't know whether maybe you call it black. Anyway, it's purple and dark. It goes perfectly with these colours here. So once I've finished this, I'll have a beautiful hat that I've knitted myself, and this scarf, which is a present from Madeline, and a jumper that's knitted by you, and I can wear them all together. So I'll just be hanging out for winter to come again.
Yeah, you look stunning. I can see that I'm going to want to borrow that scarf and jumper.
Yeah, well, you'll have to ask. The wool is the Virtual Yarns Hebridean 2-ply, which is the original or the recommended wool for the Alice or the Jade Starmore design. I love it as a wool. It's a little bit rougher, but I think it's beautiful. It's nice.
Not really, actually. It's not rough at all. It's very soft.
No, it's soft, yes.
You have to watch what you say.
I don't have a soft wool thing, so I find it beautiful. It's a heathered wool, really texture. It's got a lot of character, so I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to doing this.
And this is just leftovers because Alice is pretty generous in her kits. You often get a lot of leftovers, so... Yeah, I was pleased about that. And he started already. So next episode, he will have started the two-handed and he'll be sitting here either with a happy face or a sad face.
I certainly won't be able to say anything if I'm doing two-handed knitting here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So coming up now is a 5-minute tutorial that I've prepared for you on the beauty of twisted stitch cables. So twisted stitch cables, you're only working with 2 stitches and you don't need a cable needle. And all you need to learn is how to twist the cable to the right and then how to twist the cable to the left. And once you can do this, a whole world of beautiful, delicate patterns opens up to you. And this technique is used all over the place and for a lot of different projects, and it looks very differently depending on how it's being used. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial and find it useful, and we'll see you on the other side. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk about twisted stitch cables, some of the different ways that they can be used in patterns and how lovely they can look. And then I'm going to show you how to knit them. I love working twisted stitch patterns and cables because they can be so fine and delicate, and they're fairly easy to do because you don't need a cable needle, and therefore you don't have to stop the rhythm of your knitting by dropping one needle to pick up and use the cable needle. 2 of my favourite designers, Alice Starmore and Marie Wallen, use twisted stitch cables quite extensively, so I can show you examples of what they look like in some of the garments that I've already knitted up, and all the examples that I'm going to show you are using only 2 techniques. This first example is Anne Boleyn by Alice Starmore, and Alice has used a twisted stitch cable as a border to the vertical lines of bobbles. The main fabric between the vertical columns is reverse stocking stitch, and that is where all the shaping of the garment takes place. And the twisted stitches are knit stitches, so they'll stand out against the purl stitch background. And the cables on the right of the bobbles are twisted to the right, and the cables on the left of the bobbles are twisted to the left, and they're twisted every 4 rows. Here's another example of a 2-stitch twisted cable. This is Ella Barn, again by Alice Starmore. On the outside of the garment, she's got reverse stocking stitch panels where the shaping of the garment takes place, and the panels are divided by columns of twisted stitch cables. The cables are twisted every 4 rows again, and the columns on the right have twisted stitches going to the right, and the columns on the left have twisted stitches going to the left. That's a really fine detail which you don't see unless you're looking up close, but it does give the garment extra balance and beauty. If you have a look at this delicate cable here, it looks like a single knit stitch cable on a reverse stocking stitch background, which gradually weaves in and out around a bobble. So there's a bobble in each one of these circles here. And this single knit stitch crosses over each other above and below the bobbles. And that is also using the same 2 techniques. This is Daffodil by Marie Wallen. Marie has used the twisted stitch cable both as a simple cable column and as travelling stitches in this delicate pattern. In the cabled columns which border this central pattern, the twist happens every 2 rows. This makes it tighter and stand out even more than what you saw on the previous garments. The stitches are twisting to the right on this column and to the left on this column. And these single lines of knit stitches are travelling to the right and travelling to the left and crossing over each other, and they're all using the same 2 techniques. This is Nakraga, again by Alice Darmore, and it has a 2x2 rib at the bottom. So that's knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. And if we have a look at the 2 knit stitches, we can see that it isn't a typical cable. So one knit stitch is nearly always hidden underneath the other. And the knit stitch, which is on top, is snaking to the right and to the left, all the way up on top of the stitch that lies behind it. So twisted stitches can be used as travelling stitches and cables and as decorative ribs. If you try to knit twisted stitches as a 1x1 cable with a cable needle, it's really cumbersome and inefficient. So that's why they're knitted in a completely different manner that I'm going to show you now. To make a right twist, I'm going to be taking this second stitch here and moving it across the top of this stitch here. So first of all, I knit 2 stitches together, but I don't slide the stitches off yet. Then I knit into the first stitch again, and then I slide both stitches off together. So I'll show you that again. First I knit into 2 stitches together, but I don't slide the stitches off yet. And then I knit into the first stitch again, and then I slide them off the needle together. And you can see here that stitch was the second stitch and it's crossing across the top. To make a left twist, I'll be moving this first stitch in front of the second stitch towards the left. So first I knit into the back loop of the second stitch. I leave the stitch still on the needle, and then I knit into both of the back loops of both stitches together. And then I pull off both stitches from the needles. And you can see that the stitch here is crossed at the bottom. That means it's twisted, and the one that was here is now second on the needle. I'll show you that again. So first of all, I knit into the back loop of the second stitch, but I keep it still on the needle, and then I knit into both back loops of both stitches, and then pull them off together. And that's a twisted stitch to the left. So this is an easy and fun technique to do, and it creates really gorgeous patterns. So now you know how to do it. Have lots of fun using twisted stitches.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I live in Marietta, Georgia, which is in the Atlanta area. Living in the southeast of the United States, we do get all 4 seasons, but spring and autumn tend to be quite short, and we always seem to have a very long, hot summer and mild winters. That poses a bit of a challenge for an avid knitter, but I tend to knit very lightweight garments, things that are knit flat in pieces and seamed. For me, that often ends up being a vintage pattern. I love the style, and they often have interesting stitch patterns and construction, which I enjoy. Also love the connection to the past. I've always loved old movies, especially the MGM musicals of the 40s and 50s, and I think that's influenced my taste in clothes. I also love to knit socks. They're just a perfect palette for exploring new techniques and patterns, but they're also the perfect small project to work on year-round. I also enjoy knitting toys, and I'm lucky to have a little cat who loves knitted toys. It's fun to make things for him and watch him play with them. I learned to knit about 4.5 years ago, but I've always been interested in fiber arts. When I was 7, I had a little round loom that I used to make dresses for my dolls. Around that time, I also learned how to crochet. It was only a few simple stitches. I made a few things, but didn't really pick it up seriously until college. At that point, I didn't know anyone who knit or crocheted, and this was before Ravelry. I didn't really have access to a lot of information, aside from the odd pattern book. So I made up my own patterns. I made hats and bags and things for my friends. Kind of put it away again after college until about 10 years later when my friends started having babies and thought it'd be fun to make baby blankets for them. I did that. I made a few blankets. Also made some garments for myself, things like doilies and snowflakes. But by that point, I was introduced to Ravelry and I was tempted by all the beautiful knitted garments that I saw. So I decided to teach myself how to knit. It's been a great hobby for me. I tend to be a very anxious person, and it's been a really calming influence in my life. Also really love to knit for entertainment, and I tend to choose patterns that are complex in some way or will teach me something new. In the future, I have plans to knit from some patterns that I received from my aunt. They belonged to my Nana in the 50s and 60s. She was an avid knitter and crocheter, but she passed away when I was 4. We didn't have a chance to share that, so I think it'd be nice to knit some of those patterns. This is my most worn garment that I've ever knit. It's a modern pattern meant to mimic a 1920s style. I love the ribbing at the waist. It really pulls in and makes it more defined. Also love the hemmed border. It gives a really polished look. And the shawl collar is very flattering. I loved knitting the quatrefoil lace on this. It's quite a simple lace pattern and very easy to knit, but I think it adds the right amount of texture to the main body of the garment. I wear this a lot in the fall and winter. It's the perfect weight, and it's just really easy to throw over a lot of different outfits. I could see myself knitting this again in a different color and different lace pattern. It's just such a versatile piece. This is my first real Farrell project. It's another vintage pattern written just for one size. I sized it up a bit to make it a little less close fitting, and that gave me the opportunity to make the pattern line up at the seams, which it wasn't written to do, but I think is more visually pleasing. I also lengthened the sleeves on this to hit just below the elbow, which I find to be a more flattering and more practical sleeve length than a shorter sleeve. The color palette on this was inspired by the movie poster for Back to the Future, which is one of my favorite movies. I also just love the colors together, and Farrell seemed like the best way to incorporate them all into one sweater. This also has the typical 1940s box head sleeve. That's one of my favorite things about 40s patterns. They always seem to have an interesting sleeve cap, and that just adds so much interest to a sweater. This is another 1940s pattern that I modified quite a bit to suit me better. I sized it up a bit and lengthened the sleeves. Also changed the neckline. It was meant to have a high neckline in color. I just changed it to a V-neck. It was also supposed to have a thick ribbed border all along the edges. And I substituted in this double crochet along the fronts and neckline, and then added this really fun pom-pom edging to the bottom. I love that it echoes the bobbles. Also added these crochet covered buttons and the loop closures instead of traditional buttonholes. Yeah, I just loved the stitch pattern on this. There's hundreds of bobbles, and it only served to strengthen my bobble obsession. This is my first jointed colorwork project. It's a Golden Eagle design from 1942. When I first saw a picture of this pattern, I knew I had to knit it. There were just so many interesting design elements. The original had kind of a simple fleur-de-lis as the colorwork, but there were just a few kind of longer floats, and since this was my first time doing colorwork and it's knit flat, I wanted to try something with some shorter floats to make it a bit easier. Luckily, I found this houndstooth check pattern, and the repeat matched my stitch count perfectly. It's also period appropriate, so that worked out really well. There's also an element of intarsia in the triangles. That was a bit difficult to incorporate alongside of the colorwork, and I ended up with a couple of loose stitches along the edge, but I was able to secure those at the back, and I don't think you can really tell. The pockets were another element that I really loved about this. The instructions weren't entirely clear, but I was able to improvise them, and although I would probably never put anything in them, I love that they're lined and fully functional pockets. Also love the sleeves on this. They're a box head sleeve, which is a quintessentially 40s sleeve. They really add to the overall look. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. This was another patent design from the 40s. What I loved about this was the fact that the ribbing is over the main portion of the body, and the more interesting design element is at the waist, neckline, and cuffs. This smocking stitch was really fun to knit, and I love how it flows seamlessly into the ribbing. I also really love the back of this. Since it's such a high neckline, the buttons were necessary for it to fit over the head, but I just think it's such a pretty design element. I almost prefer the back of this sweater to the front. This is one of my favorite garments to knit. It's from a Patton's design from 1949. What drew me to this pattern was the shape and also the baubles. I really love to knit baubles. I think they're really fun, and I think they can add some interesting texture to a garment. I also enjoyed knitting the seam stitch border on this. It was knit on one long strip and then seamed to the neck and sleeves at the end. Also added this ribbed portion to the bottom here to give it a bit more shape and to make it more figure flattering.
So thank you very much to Rachel. Some of our viewers may be familiar with Rachel and her work. Rachel was very active in the cable garment cull that we held a few months ago, so you might have seen her there. If you visit Rachel's Ravelry page, you will not only see a good collection of her vintage garment knits, but she also has some brilliant socks that she's knitted, some beautiful patterns there, and also some knitted toys, which are
very
really fun.
clever toys.
So it's worth checking out.
And I loved the scene of her out on the wooden jetty. That was really great. And we have to say that we've actually taken a break since we saw you last. Yeah. We went out to the woods. The sun is shining here. It's a beautiful day. And Jackie was also wanting to go out into the woods. So we had a hike. And then there's a cafe on the outside of it's the Stadtwald near Frankfurt. And that's just the city woods, which sort of surrounds the city. And there's a cafe on the outside near Offenbach called Im Gadder. And that is dialect or Hessisch for in the garden, I think.
This is what we think, yes.
Yeah, we have to get that checked out. But we like to go there because you can get this really good ridgy-dig German food.
Yeah. But it's not so what we had today is, it's just a light meal. It's called
Grüne Soße.
Grüne Soße, which is green sauce. The green sauce is like a yogurt sauce, so it's quite light, but it's got, I think it's 7 different herbs with it. So it's very seasonal.
And they're freshly just cut up, it's not cooked.
Yeah, and these herbs, when you go to the market, you'll see it, and they'll have all the herbs separate, and you say you want a portion or so many people of Grüne Soße, and they will go and pick out a bit of each of these herbs, and they put it, and they actually wrap it up in newspaper still, which I find really amazing these days. But that's kind of a typical German sort of thing. And this dish is really Hessisch, which is the state that we live in.
And it's served with new potatoes and hard-boiled eggs.
Yeah.
And it's not particularly tasty for us. We don't find it really tasty, but it feels very wholesome, like a good wholesome meal that's healthy, and it's such a great connection because you can imagine that people have been eating this meal for the last 600 years or so.
Yeah.
And at this time every year because it's so seasonal because of the herbs that come out. So, and in Hessen, everyone goes crazy about Grüne Soße.
They love it. Yeah. So that was fun. That's where we've been.
Yeah. So we're back now.
Jackie went for a swim in the lake. Yeah. So he was happy.
Okay, so we're on to Bring and Brag.
Yep.
So last episode you saw Madeline wearing the dress that I'm wearing now, and I just finished sewing it, and she loved it so much we went out and bought material to make her a dress in it. And I've finished her dress. Here it is here. And I might show in front of Andrew a picture of her modelling it because we had a quick photo shoot the day before. And you'll see what we decided to do with Madeline's dress is to do a plain belt, and so plain fabric here on the belt, the collar and the cuff, as opposed to mine. Mine's just all the same fabric. And I think that's worked really well. This colour doesn't match the background colour. It's actually a richer green, but I think it makes the dress have a lift. So I'm really pleased with how that worked. So I also wanted to talk about sewing up jersey fabric or stretch fabric, because some people have asked me, do I use a serger? And I don't have a serger. I've only got a basic sewing machine. So I bought my sewing machine back in 97 or 98. Andrew was there coming with me. I remember falling in love with the sound of the motor because it was just a really low purr, and I thought, oh, it sounds like a beautiful motor. So it's a very basic machine, but my grandparents had given me 500 Australian dollars as a gift, and that was a lot of money, and I wanted to spend it only on one thing that I would have for a long time and I'd be able to remember them by.
That was a really good thing to do, I think, because your grandmother was a big influence on all your crafting.
Absolutely.
And so now you've got something that lasts.
Yeah, because you can easily fritter away $500. But now I've got this machine that I can always think of her, and it's great to have, something like that, a beautiful thing. So I've had it for 20 years now, and it was a Pfaff, it still is a Pfaff Tipmatic 6110. So that's what it is, if that means anything to any of you. And it hasn't even been serviced, so I do have to go and get it serviced, but it's been very sturdy, very reliable. It hasn't had a lot of use, mind you, but it has had spurts of intensive use.
Yeah.
And then it's put away for a long time. But I want to show you what I do use on this machine. So I'll turn the dress inside out so you can have a look at my seams. So the thing is, with when you're sewing up stretch material on a seam, you can't just sew it up with a straight stitch because the seam has to be able to stretch. You can see how I'm stretching it just as much as the actual material will. Because if I sewed this up in a straight stitch and I stretched it like this, all the stitches would just pop open, break open. It's amazing to do that. But here you can see I've actually sewn up my seam with a very, very tiny zigzag stitch, and hopefully you can see that. I might put another picture so you can see closely. So there's one line of very small zigzag, and that is allowing me to stretch to the full stretch of the actual fabric and the stitches don't pop. And then I did my seam allowance to cut it down to about 6 millimeters, and I overlocked the seam with a wider zigzag stitch that has got 3 stitches one direction, 3 stitches the other direction. So 3 tiny stitches, 3 tiny stitches. And that just stops the edges from fraying. So I did that everywhere. And even on these bust darts and waist darts here, if you can hold it again for me, dolls, you can see that's just a tiny zigzag stitch there and here. And to me, it's working really well on my hem. I just turned it up to the width that I wanted and then sewed the tiny zigzag stitch right on the very edge. So it's sewing it up and stopping it from fraying at the same time. And that you can do that on the hem. You can't do it on the side seam because you do actually want to have a bit of a seam allowance. So that worked well, I think, and I just learnt to do that by looking at enough tutorials to decide that I think this is going to work, and it did.
It survived one wash.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah. And then I thought I'm going to sew another skirt pattern, and this skirt is the same pattern that I used on my woolen skirt that I sewed a couple of episodes ago, but this time I wanted to try out pleats. So you can see on the front here I've got 2 pleats, and I'll just, there, if you can hold it there. I've got 2 pleats here, 1, 2 and 2 on this side, and the top of the pleats have been sewn down so they're connected from the waistband downwards. Now the problem with this material is it resists holding its crease after it's been pressed, and I like to have those really sharp knife edge pleats on the skirt, and I'm not quite sure how to do that because the pattern didn't tell me what to do, but I again did some research on YouTube, and this is what I'm going to do. So we turn the skirt inside out, and I still have to hand sew down this interfacing. So the first thing you have to do is turn up the hem of the skirt, and I'll only do that a very minimal amount so I don't have a lot of bulk, because the more bulk you've got down here, that's also going to stop you from having a crisp pleat. So then the thing I figured out is I have to take the inside edge, the inner edge of this pleat on the inside, and then I'm going to sew really close to the edge a straight line all the way down here. And then that should keep the inner fold of the pleat really crisp. And then I'll do it on the outside as well. So I do the inside first, and then the outside I do the same thing. You have to pin it and press it and make sure you've got it exactly straight. And then right on the very edge, I'll do a straight stitch right down, and that should keep it that really lovely crisp pleat. The only thing is I have to line up that row of stitches with the row of stitches that's already there keeping the pleats down. So that'll be fun to see if I can manage that. But if I stuff it up in any way, it really doesn't matter because the material is 15 years old. It's been sitting in my cupboard. Yeah, so that's my latest sewing adventures. I wanted just to give you a very quick update on what's going on with my arms. For new viewers, I was diagnosed with repetitive strain injury in my elbows. So it's commonly called golfer's elbow when the inside tendons of the elbow are inflamed. And so I had that quite strongly on both arms, and just very mild tennis elbow, which is inflammation on the outside of the elbows. So I was told to have complete rest from knitting and many activities that use the same kind of movements. And just to let you know, I had this pain for a year. So I was knitting on this pain for a year, trying to manage it. So don't do what I did. Learn from my mistakes, because they say the longer that you have the pain for, the longer it takes to heal. And I'm also a singer and a pianist, and I accompany my singing students on the piano. So I use the same muscle group doing that. I used to knit for about 2 hours a day, and definitely more on the weekends and on holidays. And also just computer work and editing that's also using the same muscle groups. So it's a lot of working in the same muscle groups can be problematic. But actually I've been playing the piano and knitting for years without any problems whatsoever, and knitting quite a lot for years. And it just must have been something else. I must have done something else that just tipped the balance over. And what they say is that once you've got inflamed tendons on the elbows, it takes a lot longer to heal because there's less blood flow through there. So that's what I've been told. So I haven't knitted since around the beginning of April, and I'm going to hang in there and not knit for 1 more month. So I do want to say a very big thank you to all of you for being so patient, because I haven't shown you any knitting projects in this time. And so thank you so much for hanging in there and being patient with me. But it is really important for me to heal properly so I have a long, healthy knitting life ahead of me. And I am doing the exercises. Back in episode 26, I showed you the eccentric exercises that I was doing with the wine bottle. So that's not this exercise, but it's a pretty cool exercise where you're putting the muscle under stress while you're lengthening it. And that strengthens the white tendon part of the muscle as opposed to the red belly part of the muscle, which normally we strengthen when we do weights. And that's very important to keep the tendon connections very strong. So I've been doing that. It's also important to strengthen the muscles between your shoulder blades, because this posture here that we often get into is really bad, and it's this sort of stretching between the shoulder blades.
That's really funny though, because I would have said, because you're a singer and performer and all of that, you're very aware of your posture.
Yeah, I know.
And I would say you're not particularly muscly in your upper body.
I'm very aware of my posture, and I'm very, and certainly when I sing, this has to be open and up, and That's the correct posture. But I think also once you get to a certain age, your muscles just fall off you. They fall down here. So I am actively doing more upper body muscles. You won't see it, but I am. Yeah. So thanks for hanging in there, and the end is in sight.
Our lace garment and hapcal is going along really well. We have a lot of spectacular garments and other projects to be seen in the thread, so go and have a look at that for some inspiration. The cal is finishing on the 30th of June, so there's still some time if you want to get into that. We've got 2 prizes to present or to introduce today. In episode 13, we met Vicky from Southeastern Australia. She is a very accomplished knitter, but she also produces natural soaps under the brand Red Gum Soaps.
Yes.
She has donated a whole package of things, including several soaps. An orange and lavender shampoo bar is in there, and some other
gorgeous.
things. Yeah, beautiful stuff. She's also put in a project bag. We haven't seen any of these project bags in person, but given the standard of the knitting projects that Vicky does, we can be sure that it is a beautifully made bag. So that's a really nice present from her and really nice prize. Thank you very much to Vicky.
Yeah, Vicky was a knitter of the world in episode 13.
That's right.
Yeah, and our second prize, I've been looking around to try to find a book of patterns that I would be really proud to give away as a present for the Carl, as a prize. And then I came across New Lace Knitting by Romy Hill or Rosemary Hill. And when I saw this book, I thought, this is just the book I've been looking for. So it's got a whole lot of patterns in it, ranging from jumpers and cardigans, tams, cowls, shawls. And every single pattern is a star pattern. So often you get a book and 3 or 4 of them are really exciting and the rest are sort of like fillers just to get the quantity. And this one, every one is really beautiful, timeless, really well thought out. So the patterns are fantastic. Romy is really a thoughtful, intelligent designer. The way the book is laid out is excellent. The charts are very, very clear. And there's a lot of extra information in there in little note forms so that you pick up a lot of extra skills by going through this. So I think this is a brilliant book and I'm really proud to be able to give it away as a prize. So we've got 2 fantastic prizes for you. So keep those knitting needles clacking, and it's been a lot of interaction going on in the thread, and I'm really happy about that. So thank you, everybody.
Yep. The Fruity Knitting podcast continues thanks to small regular contributions from many of our viewers. If you would like to support the show, then please go to fruityknitting.com and find out how you can become a patron. It's really easy and very flexible, and there are some little rewards to thank you for your support.
And thanks so much for those of you who have become patrons in the last month. We really appreciate it, and we're very grateful to all of our patrons who've been supporting us for many months. Without your help, we wouldn't keep doing it. So thank you so much. We wouldn't be able to because of the time commitment. And thank you to all of our viewers who've chosen to spend time with us. We really appreciate it. And we're up to the interview now with Sidsel Høivik, or Høivik. I've been trying to practice to get it right, but I don't think I'm very good at it. Yeah. Sidsel says it with a lovely sing-song effect that I can't quite get. But when I first saw Sidsel's designs, I thought, oh, it's a Norwegian Alistamor, because they're very ornate and very colourful and quite beautiful. And if you know the Norwegian jacket, the kofte, you can imagine it's a little bit like that, so quite traditional looking but feminine and with a modern twist and very dressy actually.
Yeah, I think they're super stylish designs. I like them. They're bright colours.
Yeah.
To me, it is very Nordic.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And when I was editing, it was so hard for me not to break out and go and order a kit because I've got my eye on a couple of her designs. And Madeline was looking through with me and she was saying, oh, I want to knit that one. Oh, I mean, she doesn't want to knit it. She wanted me to knit her one. And it happened to be the one that I wanted to knit for myself. And I thought, actually, you can knit your own. So enjoy the interview and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time.
Yep. Thanks very much for joining us today. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. My guest today is the Norwegian designer Sidsel Høivik. Sidsel's love of knitting started at the age of 4 when she was first taught by her mother and grandmother. She also learned to crochet, embroider and sew as a child, and her designs are a clever combination of all of these techniques which create very beautiful and ornate fabrics. And since 1990, Sidsel has designed knitwear for most of the Scandinavian knitwear magazines and yarn companies. She's recently set up her own company where she now sells her designs as kits to an international customer base. Sidsel's designs are very colourful and typically use the stranded knitting technique. And as many of you already know, I'm particularly partial to ornate and colourful fabric textures, and stranded knitting is my favourite knitting technique. So when I stumbled across Sidsel's work, I was very excited to find another designer with an aesthetic that I adore. So I am very happy to welcome you, Sidsel, to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm very delighted to be here today, but a little nervous too, because I'm not used to having interviews in English, and since that's not my mother language, I may have some notes here to help me out a little.
That's fine, and I appreciate it, and the viewers will also appreciate that you're speaking in a second language, and that's great, and your English is wonderful. So I thought we'd start off just very briefly with a little bit of background information, because I think of Norway as having a strong traditional knitting culture. So what was it like for you growing up and knitting in Norway?
From an early age, I was very, very fascinated by knitting. My mother and my grandmother, I grew up in the same house as my grandfathers and my family. And my mother and grandmother, they knitted a lot, and I was nagging to learn from them. But they didn't think I was able to start knitting that early, but after nagging for a while, they taught me. And I was 4 when I started to knit. And not long after, I started to crochet too. And I don't think I've ever been more after that. At least if I have a yarn and knitting needles and crochet needle close to me.
And as a teenager, when you were knitting, was that something that a lot of your friends were doing as well, or was that something that you were doing quite alone?
Some of them did, but not as much as I did. I was very passionate, so I was kind of a nerd about it. So there was a period in the 80s, it was very, very popular, and most people in Norway knitted. But then it was very popular with the worsted wool. Which you could use very thick needles to knit them, and it was very colorful, so that became very popular for a few years.
When I look at your designs, I see that patterns, colours and textures play a major role in your design aesthetic. So how would you describe your design aesthetic, and where do you get your inspiration from?
I think I have the traditional patterns, or I think I have them in my backbone. I would like to make them more feminine. I wanted to be a little more stylish. Something I like to make a jacket, for example, or a cardigan that is more dressy, so you can easily dress up and dress down, wear together with something a little more classy, and you can also use it with worn out jeans. And my inspiration, I get it from very many things, very much from folkloristic costumes, and also, of course, Norwegian traditional patterns.
And what is it that you like about folklore patterns? How would you describe it? Is it the colours? Is it the way they're drawn? They're asymmetrical or symmetrical, or what is it that you like?
I very much like it. Sometimes it can be asymmetrical. The vivid colours. What I like, the vivid colours, and sometimes one color are not really harmonious. It can be a color that kind of disturbs your eyes, but I think that's kind of fun. I think it's important to have all the colors, not too harmonious. I think it's important and very nice when a color stands out and kind of can clash with some of the other colors, for instance.
Talk about the embroidery and perhaps the technique of knitting your work, because you use embroidery to add extra colour, don't you? So tell us a bit about that.
I never use more than 2 colors when I knit around. Almost all my garments, they're knitted around and with two threads and stranded pattern. Many people think that I use more threads. I heard that many times, said, oh, I can't knit that because there are so many threads, but they're not. I use 2 threads because it doesn't get too thick, it doesn't get, it's not uneasy to work with. And then afterwards I add these stitches to the garment. Very often I use the Swiss darning, I use chain stitches, sometimes bullion stitch. I can also crochet to make, for instance, vertical lines, to make checkerboard patterns. So I love this part when I can really play with it.
That's such an interesting point. So you're keeping the garment really still thin and nice looking, and you don't have 3 or more colours stranded behind. That's great. But
yeah.
and you do repeat motifs in different colours, and you can do that by embroidering.
You can have one round with the roses, it's all knitted in 2 colors. And then you can add 2 or 3 other colors to the rose or to the flower. So you don't need to have the same color on each flower, even if it's in the same round.
And you also use sequences and beads and ribbons. So tell us why you like. Yeah, why do you like to work with ribbons?
I think it's an easy way to add some extra to your knitting. Like this, for instance. If you can see that, I picked up flowers. I picked up colors from the ribbons to use in the borders. So that's a nice way. That can inspire me.
And when you sell your kits, you also include the ribbons and beads and buttons in, don't you?
Yes, I do. Sometimes you can choose if you want the ribbons or some buttons or not, but there's always a possibility to have them in the kit.
That sounds great. So let's hear a little bit about your typical designing process. So what does it typically look like for you from the first idea to the finished garment?
Before I used to work for different yarn companies and magazines, and then I had to make very nice drawings with the colors and everything, and I had to make knitting swatches to show them my ideas. Now I don't have to do that anymore because now I'm my own boss, so I decide myself. So it's enough to have an idea in my head. Sometimes it's there for a long period, and I'm thinking about it, and when I have a quite good idea of what it's going to be, I pick different skeins of colors, and I put them together, and they lie there for a certain period of time. It may take some days, and I do all the things meanwhile. But then when I have decided for some colors, I make the charts.
Yeah.
I do that in Adobe Illustrator. Then I write down the pattern, first with all the measures, and then I write the pattern. It's not always, sometimes I get very eager, and I send it out to knitter before it's all ready. But if I have the body ready, for instance, I can send it out to a knitter to start with.
Do they knit the whole garment for you and finish it off, or do they send it back and you do extra embroidery and things like that, or do they do that?
I do all that myself. When I get a garment back, they have put it together, made it up, and done all the knitting, but I do all these details. But very often the designs live their own lives. What I had originally planned first changes. So, and sometimes I redo things many times. A border, a crocheted border, I'm not content with that. I redo it many times sometimes. And sometimes it works from the beginning, and I don't have to redo anything.
So Sidsel, are there other knitwear designers who you find particularly inspirational, or perhaps have had a strong influence on your crafting skills or your designing skills?
I think it started more or less with Kate Fassett for many years ago. I think most knitters in some way have been inspired by him. Not so much for his techniques, but for his beautiful color works. The way he has done that, I think that's been revolutionary, more or less. There is a Norwegian knitwear designer called Irene Haugland. In the 80s, she was, and early 90s, she has been a great inspiration for me. And at least to my knowledge, she has been the first designer who has been using embroidery on her knitting. And then there is also a Danish Sidsel Høivik. And then there is a Norwegian, I would call her icon, design icon, Solveig Hisdal. She used to do a lot of hand knitting before, but the last 20 years, more or less, I think, she's been the sole designer for a company in Norway called Oleana, which is very successful, making a beautiful machine-knitted garment to women.
And what do you see as your particular strengths as a designer?
I think the way I play with colors. I'm not afraid of using colors. I think my patterns are good too. At least I hear that. I work very hard to make them good. When I was working in a magazine many years ago, I learned very much there about writing patterns. Sorry.
Yeah.
Especially from one of my colleagues, and I always have her voice in my head when I write the pattern, because she told me once when she was quite fresh and new in the game, she working for a magazine, she made a mistake, and it was a catastrophe. Everybody was calling, and she told herself that this will never happen again. So I hear her voice in my head when I'm writing a pattern. I don't want that to happen either. But everybody makes mistakes, but I try to avoid them.
Just talking about patterns and knitters, a lot of knitters like to take a pattern and change it around and make it more their own. And it usually starts with them changing the colourways. So what advice do you have to knitters who would like to knit one of your designs but change the colour, but at the same time still keep the original beauty and integrity of your design?
I will advise them to keep a dark color dark and a light color light. To do it the other way around, it may not, the pattern or the design will look completely different. But it's usually no problem to change some colors. I do that very often with many customers. I ask them, which two colors do you want for a main color? Then I pick a few skeins and make 2-3 pictures. I send them pictures, and they have their pick, and then we decide for the rest of the colors. And usually that works pretty good.
That sounds like a wonderful service. I think that's fantastic. I love the cardigan you're wearing at the moment. Green is my favourite colour, as most of the viewers know. But I think it's wonderful if someone loved that cardigan but would like to have it in blues or maybe even pinks, that you're able to advise that. So let's talk now about the yarns that you're using, because you're selling your patterns now in kits and with the yarn that's produced by a Norwegian yarn company, and I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, Hillesvåg. Hillesvåg.
Yes.
So could you tell us a little bit about this yarn company and describe their yarn and why it works so well with your designs?
Yes, Hillesvåg is an old company in Norway. Actually, it's a family-run business, and it's the fourth generation who runs it right now. And next year, they have 120 years of production, so I think that's great. They try to use 100% Norwegian yarn. Sometimes they're not able, they don't have enough of the Norwegian, but at least 80% is for sure always Norwegian. But 100% is the aim. I use very much this quality called ask. It's the gauge or tension is 24 stitches to every 10 centimeters. I think that's very good for stranded color work. Mostly because it's medium thick. If it's thinner, a lot of people, customer gets scared because they think they're never gonna be finished with knitting like that. And if it's thicker, it gets too thick, I think.
Yes.
So I think it's perfect in that way. The quality is very good too. It's light, it's durable. You can make big long jackets, coats, and it doesn't sag. It keeps the shape.
I think that's lovely that you're working with a family business. So in a sense, your final designs and kits are completely Norwegian. They're a complete Norwegian product. And you were telling me that you had a very popular design last year, and that the family worked really overtime to make sure that there was enough yarns for this sudden influx of buying. That's great. That's great to have that connection and that relationship.
I'm very, very happy with this is the popular. This is my bestseller. It was really unexpected. The sale exploded, and they were really, really helpful. They were working overtime to help me out with dyeing yarn, producing yarn, and we made it. Just hardly, but we made it. I'm very, very grateful for that.
Well, I love your designs, and I'm very interested to see how you construct them and where you put your extra embroidery and sewing. So what have you got to show us?
Okay, this is what I call the waffeljakke. In English, it would be a waffle cardigan. It's in front of my second book. I start down here and knit this piece back and forth. I knit one ridge, and after that, I start to knit everything round. I always use just 2 threads. Many people think maybe I use more threads here, but just 2. And the main color is always the same. But the contrast color changes all the way up. In addition to that, I have made some stripes, vertical stripes, with one pearl stitch. That makes it easy to make a crochet line afterwards, so you can make a square, and you don't get all these long threads on the back on the wrong side. Then when I finished, I do the steeks here. I cut it open, and I do the same for the sleeves. So it's knitted around all up to the neck. The sleeves too are made more or less the same way, knitted around and till here up under the sleeves, and here the top is knitted back and forth. The same here. The last piece is knitted back and forth. In the end, I use the double front bands. So the cut edges,
yes,
are hidden inside this front band, and then I crochet around the borders here with the reverse single crochet, and I use embroidery around each of these hearts with 2 colors actually. So first the lime green, and then afterwards the dark cerise color. So that's what makes it so colorful. And I also made these wrist warmers, and as you see, they're not the same colors. I don't think they have to be, and I very often do that on the sleeves too. I make the colors a little different, opposite colors very often. And the waist is slightly fitted too, so it looks nice and feminine, I think.
And have you got beads or sequences on that one?
I do have mother of pearls buttons in green and red.
And that all comes in the kit together with the yarn?
You can choose if you want that, because so many buttons are quite expensive. So, but you can have them if you want to. Around the sleeves too, I have a lot of these heart-shaped mother of pearls pearl buttons. I really love the mother of pearl buttons, so I use them a lot. Okay, this has a Norwegian name, only Norwegian name, called fingenser med rosepynt. So that means something like fancy sweater with roses. It's knitted with a very exclusive yarn, 50-50 silk and alpaca, so it's very soft. And it's knitted top down. Here, around where I changed the two colors, I have 2 rows of eyelet holes. And then I increase in middle of this. And after that, it's a raglan, if you can see that here. It's not very visible, but that's okay. And then the waist, it's also fitted. I also have increasing and decreasing in each side. I do crochet in the eyelet holes with the, I think it was 3 threads in a row. But it's very important to keep it quite loose. If it's too tight, it will come up.
Yeah.
It will pop up. And the leaves here, they are knitted, and the small rosebuds, they are crocheted. I have 4 sizes pattern of this. For now, it's only Norwegian, but if there is a big demand for it, I will have it translated to, like most of the other patterns. The same crochet border is also here on the bottom of the both sleeves. This is my main commercial success, Morgendis, or Morning Mist, as it's called in English, or Morgendis Vest, I think in Dutch, because many of my patterns are actually translated into Dutch. This is not very difficult. The same band here, knitted back and forth. And then I have a ridge, I knit a ridge here, and then I knit around, the rest around, knit around till we come to the neckline here. The same way here with the sleeves, knitted around. This was first original. I do it with almost all my jackets now, or cardigans now. It was first thought as a cover on the back, on the wrong side. Okay. But then I like it so much when it rolls up like that. So last few years I made most of my jackets or most of my cardigans in this way. And then this this ridge was first thought of as an edge, but then I think it works good. It looks good when I knit in this ridge. So I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Then it's also just knitted with 2 colors. So all these, everything you see here is embroidered.
Okay.
After it's finished, with the Swiss darning stitches, which is very easy. So you just follow the pattern, so it's easy. Then I have completed it with the. I also have these double front bands, which then cover the edges, the cut edges, and then I have done with crochet slip stitches and reverse single crochet around all borders, and also in the same in a ridge here on the front bands. And in the end, I put on all the sequences. Some people don't think that this kind of jacket fits with sequins, but I do. Actually, my jackets or my cardigans are quite feminine, and in Norway it's very, very popular with the traditional jackets right now. Everybody makes them, more or less. It's very, very popular, and the traditional jackets, they're called kofte, but kofte is also it's not feminine. I used to think it was kind of old-fashioned. So when people start to call my jackets for kofte too, first I was a little offended. But then I thought, no, I think that's it's okay. I call them kofte because you get it if you hashtag them with kofte, you get a lot of hits. So, so it's not a bad idea, I think.
I have just a little question. You do waist shaping on the side with decreases and increases. How do you do that and keep the pattern looking good? Is it because the pattern's quite a small repeat? Do you have a seam stitch?
I have one pearl stitch.
Yes.
You don't need to do it that way, but I have done that. Yeah. There are many ways. That's so good about knitting. You can do. There's not one solution to all things, but I do it this way. I think that some people think it's a seam there, and lately some of my newer jackets they are even wider in the bottom than up here, because very many women have a little more on the hips than up here. So
yeah.
Okay, this last jacket or cardigan is called the Åsemors kofte, or Mother Åse's cardigan. It's named after my mother, who I lost in last August. I was working on this jacket when she died, so it was very natural for me to give this jacket that name. I picked the colors from the ribbons to use in the borders. This is also knitted around in the same way, with the first here this piece back and forth, and then the ridge, and then I start to knit everything around. And this is my only cardigan where I use 3 threads, but in each border there are just 3 rounds that this happens, so it's not very bothering. What I've been playing with lately is changing the main color and the contrast color back and forth, and sometimes on the sleeves too. But very many people think that these are knitted back and forth, but they're not. They're the same color going all around, but you just change the main color and contrast color. But this does not have any embroideries. So here the ribbons do all the decoration. But I have also made some quite new front bands lately. They are halfway knitted and half crochet. And I think that works very, very good. So I haven't seen anybody doing this before, so I think that is my invention. At least I haven't seen it before. So I'm quite content with this. The buttons too, they are the same buttons, but here I use 3 colors of buttons, and that looks very good with the ribbons, I think. At least I like that very much. And the colors I'm a little unusual with the lime and the very light blue. It's my second bestseller, so I'm very happy with it.
Yes, it's my favourite design from yours. Thank you so much, Sidsel, for sharing your beautiful work with us today. It's been a real privilege to meet you and get to see some of your work in more detail. Just to finish off the interview, would you like to share with us any of your future plans or dreams?
Since I now have my own company, I'm working on to make it grow, to serve more foreign customers. I do already sell a lot to foreign countries, very much to Netherlands, thanks also to one of these great Dutch knitters who translate a lot of my patterns into Dutch. So I have very many customers in Netherlands. Maybe I'm going there. I've been invited, and I'm going to some other knitting festivals. I'm going to Denmark in September to Fane Knitting Festival to have a PowerPoint presentation and a workshop. Then I'm planning to make a lot more designs to put in my web shop. So that's my close future plans right now.
Well, that sounds very exciting. And yeah, that sounds a lot for people to be able to look at, and great that they can come and see you and see your work in person in Denmark. So thank you so much for your time today, and I'd like to wish you all of the best for your future plans and your new company.
Thank you.
So we'll say goodbye to the audience now.
Bye-bye. Hope you enjoyed my work.